Senate hopeful Democrat P.G. Sittenfeld says he is willing to do something Ted Strickland, his opponent in the race for the Democratic Senate nomination, would never even consider. Take on the NRA. Democratic Senate candidate P.G. Sittenfeld says he's the only Ohio candidate in the 2016 U.S. Senate race who supports significant gun restrictions. The Cincinnati councilman said he is not beholden to the powerful National Rifle Association. Both his Democratic primary opponent, Ted Strickland, and Republican Senator Rob Portman are backed by the NRA. Sittenfeld says he'll push for universal background checks, safe gun storage requirements, and ammunition microstamping.
And if comprehensive background checks with no gun show or other loopholes prevents even one mass shooting, I believe it will be more than worth the effort.
Democratic candidate P.G. Sittenfeld is challenging former Governor Ted Strickland for the chance to win a U.S. Senate seat. Now he's taking aim at an issue that he thinks offers a clear difference between his campaign and that of the former governor. Well, Mr. Sittenfeld, you have taken a very firm stance on gun control in Ohio. What do you want this state to do?
Well, I think it actually speaks to a broader issue. For me, there is such a desire both here in Ohio and across the country for change, and especially in the halls of Congress. And the only way we're going to get it is by sending new leaders and fresh voices and thinkers to represent us in Washington. And I think, nowhere than on the issue of gun violence and the rising tide of mass shootings is it more clear that we need people that aren't going to continue to do what, so many politicians like Ted Strickland and Rob Portman have done, kowtowing to the extreme wing of the gun lobby, kowtowing to the extreme wing of the NRA. And just to put this issue in perspective, 32,000 people in this country die every year at the hand of a gun. That's 90 people, Colleen, every day, every week, every month. And, we're never going to move the needle on this issue if we have people like Ted Strickland, A+ rating from the NRA, people like Rob Portman, A rating from the NRA. So I've supported things like universal background checks.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. What are you specifically talking about that
you
want to change?
A handful of things. So universal background checks with no gun show loopholes or no internet loopholes. Or, there are Dylan Roof, the psychotic racist who went into Mother of Emmanuel Church in Charleston and brutally murdered 9 people, was able to legally buy his gun because of a loophole in our background check system. So that's number one. 2, I don't believe that assault weapons that should be used in military and combat situations belong in our neighborhoods and on our streets. So reinstating an assault weapons ban, making sure that folks who have histories of domestic violence or severe mental illness aren't able to easily access guns. And then here's another one which I think is incredibly timely following the tragedy that's recently unfolded in Paris. Right now in the country today, because of the NRA and because people like Ted Strickland and Rob Portman have done the NRA's bidding, people on our own government's terrorist watch list can legally go into a store and buy a gun. And in the last decade, 2,000 of them have. To me, that's a no-brainer. If you are too dangerous to go on an airplane, you're also too dangerous to buy a gun. Everything I'm talking about is broadly supported by the American people and gun owners. This is common sense. We need some senators that also have that common sense.
But let's be realistically about how you enforce that. You're talking about these universal, the gun lobbyists would argue that we already have laws against people with mental illness. Isn't it more a matter of enforcement? And also, when you're in a state like Ohio, this is a purple state. There are a lot of gun owners in this state. And as soon as they hear that word gun control, they bristle. So how do you realistically make this work?
I support the Second Amendment, and for folks that want to go hunting and take the next generation hunting, of course, there is an inalienable right for folks to protect themselves and their homes and their families. The kind of things I'm talking about, especially universal background checks without gun show loopholes, without internet loopholes, these are things that are broadly supported. 90% of the American people support background checks. A majority of gun owners support background checks. And to your point about enforcement, we've had 2 million people, who have been denied a gun because of that background check. So there are loopholes that need to be closed. These are things that I think, responsible citizens, responsible Ohioans, including those who are gun owners, they want these things.
I know that you are going up against Ted Strickland,
Yeah.
and obviously you hope to go up against Rob Portman,
Sure.
who have diametrically opposing views on this. Do you run the risk of being a single issue candidate when you kind of put all your eggs into the gun control basket?
Well, first of all, look, what is a campaign if not a forum and a venue to have a meaningful conversation about substantive differences? And when I look at Ted Strickland's record, voting against universal background checks repeatedly in Congress when he was the governor, pledging to sign a bill that would allow for bringing guns into establishments that are serving alcohol. He voted to leave assault weapons on our streets, but wouldn't vote in favor of child-proof gun safety locks. He has a record that he has to own. So as someone who has, I think, a more forward-looking, common-sense vision around gun safety, of course I'm going to draw that contrast. But to your question, our campaign has been and will continue to be about a lot of things: building a fair economy, making sure that we're taking climate change head on, being sensible in our foreign policy, making sure that there's LGBT equality and that women continue to be in charge of their own healthcare choices. But look, this is a big issue, and I think Democratic primary voters deserve to know about it. And if they want to know more, I'd encourage them to go to my website, pgsittenfeld.com, and I lay out a whole host of issues, gun safety being among them.
All right, we thank you so much for being with us this morning.
It was a pleasure.